Are you the fanatic we're looking for? Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor. The Draft Professor is the only interactive and dynamic mock draft simulator. Dynamic means that the picks from one mock draft will influence the players that team selects in the next mock draft. This can be done with a first-round challenge. This can be done with a second-round challenge. This will be done with any mock draft from the Draft Professor. In addition, the Draft Professor has rank players functionality, allowing you to rank players and build your own big board and then compare your board to that of other users at the Draft Professor. In addition, the Draft Professor has draft a team functionality. This allows 2 or more users to snake draft a team of 22 players from the rookie pool, and then you can debate which players you like at which position and why. Thank you for tuning in to this podcast. This episode will begin shortly. Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. I'm Jim, and you might recognize Bill. He's been here a few times before, but we have Mike and Jared with us for the first time. So, Mike, Jared, welcome to the Draft Professor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Cool. So we're going to be going over some edge prospects and some scouting reports. We're going to kick this one off with LT Overton from Alabama. So, Bill, what do you want to tell us about LT Overton?
Yeah, so LT Overton from Alabama, 6'5", 285, 283 pounds, right in that mid 280 range. The big things with LT Overton, even though he's 285, this guy's got an athletic profile that's pretty crazy. He's got pretty exceptional athleticism. You know, he's got really good hand usage in the trenches, has an ability to shed blocks, also has a really good play strength. I've seen his bull rush move, and it is very effective in pushing offensive linemen back into the quarterback's lap and collapsing the pocket. He also is an instinctive run defender. This is a guy that sees gaps before they happen and can just immediately fill them. The big knocks for me on LT Overton is he tends to rely on that athletic ability rather than using his technique. So it's going to get him into trouble against more polished offensive tackles. And that's not to say his technique's bad. It's just he knows who he is and what brought him to the dance, and it's that athletic ability, and he's going to rely on that pretty heavily. He also does need to improve his get off. There were a few snaps and a few games where I saw he was a little bit late getting off the snap, just a timing concern that he'll need to address. I do also see that his pad level rises as he goes through his rushes, so he gives up unnecessary leverage when he doesn't need to. All in all, though, this is an edge that is firmly in my top 100 picks, right around my round 2 to round 3 range. Kind of reminds me a lot of Chandler Jones in that same aspect. This is a guy I've seen people have him as a defensive tackle as well. And for me, defensive tackles that are sub 300 pounds are a very hard sell. But I think he could definitely fit in as a 3-4 edge rusher, a big body edge type of guy that can use his athleticism very well. But Jared, with all that being said, I'll turn the floor over to you for LT Overton. What did you see from Overton, and what do you have on his game?
Yeah, of the list you guys sent me over of guys to watch, Overton was by far my favorite. I mean, you're absolutely spot on with the athleticism pops on screen. And for someone his size, they even have him standing up and dropping into coverage and stuff in Alabama. It was pretty crazy to watch. I personally think you're also spot on with the pass rush technique. His pass rush is all athleticism. He's just swimming, bowling, trying to get around whoever's in front of him. And I think in one-on-one opportunities, it was extremely effective, because he's able to really take on any kind of offensive lineman. I think he's more alignment-wise. Alabama uses him in a way I wouldn't. I think he's like a old school, like base, early 2000s 4-3 defensive end. I think he can absolutely line up over a tackle or in the B gap and stuff and really just cause a whole lot of havoc. So yeah, I came away a huge fan of Overton. I thought he was a really fun, and I think, to be honest with you, I had no preconceived notions. I didn't watch any of them before, and I haven't watched any Alabama defense film all year. I think he's got like very close to first round grade from me because what I saw was really fun. And just a sorry, I'm a little all over the place right now. But the pass rush technique is lacking. I think he was actually very technical in the run game. Not so much instinctual. He does a lot of stacking and shedding. He peeks. He always keeps his eyes up. He knows where the ball is every time. It was the most impressive part of his game, and I think that is what really moves him closer to the front end of the draft because he has a really good floor with that run defense base that he's built.
Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, kind of the overall statement of him just being an elite run defender is kind of what flashed for me at first. I know a lot of people are going to look at him and see the 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, and kind of look down upon him, but it's more the pure traits that he kind of brings. He's definitely more of an upside pick, I'd say. Just kind of going off both what Bill and Jared said with the, extreme athleticism for his size and be able to, plug him in at different positions, edge. We talked possibly, I could definitely also see him as a 3-4 defensive end. And yeah, his ability to just, fill gaps, being able to shed and be a strong run defender definitely gives him a high floor. I agree with the lack of kind of overall completeness, I guess, with his pass rush. Would like to see a little more moves and a game plan. And he finds ways to get pressure just with his athleticism and size. So I would say I'm a little higher than round 2 to 3. This was my first time, also no preconceived notion. First time checking him out when you guys sent him to me. But I would say he's definitely more of a project. I think he could enter and immediately start depending on the team. But I feel like, develop those traits, get him more fluent as a pass rusher. I definitely could see him being a dominant player in the league.
Cool. Okay. Next player, Antwuan Powell-Ryland from Virginia Tech. So, Bill, you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, so Antwuan Powell-Ryland from Virginia Tech, 6'3". I've seen question marks around his weight. I've seen some people have it at 240, some have it at 250, some have it at 255. So that's one thing that was questioning for me. But we'll come back to that. First, looking at the positives, this is a guy, he's got an explosive first step off of that line. He's got some real juice in his pass rush ability and his athletic ability. Has a motor that's going to go deep into games, fourth quarter, overtime. This is a guy who can get out into those deeper waters, and you're not going to notice any real drop-off. Has really good hand usage when shedding blocks, and you see it in the run game especially. You also see it in his pass rush ability as well. He also has a really good ability to convert speed to power, and it happens pretty frequently on tape. He's been very productive at Virginia Tech this season. The big knock, and I hit on it a little bit, is his weight. He could come in a little bit undersized for a true edge if he's closer to that 240. In a previous episode I did with Newt, we talked about Josiah Stewart from Michigan, who has that same kind of weight concern, but he has a much better foundation, whereas Antwuan Powell-Ryland is solely a pass rush specialist. And on the lighter side of things, I don't know if you're going to put him in an edge role. You'd probably want to stand him up as a linebacker. By that same token, you haven't really seen him do that in his career, so you don't know what you're going to get from him in that aspect. He did frequently overshoot gaps in a lot of the tape that I watched, so that's a concern. Him just being over-aggressive in space and overshooting those gaps. His tackling technique is inconsistent. He does miss a lot of tackles in the open field, especially. But all in all, this is a guy at the early parts of day 3, round 4. I would take a shot on him just for his pass rush juice alone as like a designated pass rusher. Kind of reminds me a lot of Marcus Golden in ways that he's more of an edge linebacker hybrid just based on his size, but has the juice to get to the passer. And I think that's probably going to be the team that drafts him is going to have to figure out how do we get his pass rush ability on the field without exposing his undersized frame. But Mike, I'll turn the floor over to you. How do you feel about Antwuan Powell-Ryland, and how would you use him at the next level?
Yeah, kind of going off what you said, just a mix of speed and power, being able to, show that outside attack and then sometimes switch it into the inside or punch a guy. But yeah, just kind of instantly, I agree with the more of a pure just pass rusher. He's going to enter the league, probably be a rotational guy off the rip, just with the kind of lack of, I guess, not effort, but impact versus the run at the size he's at. One thing you noted that I definitely saw was just finishing plays. There's a lot of, tackles and he's got great numbers if you're just looking purely numbers, but there's a lot of stats left on the field with misses. So I'd like to see that get cleaned up a little bit. But I see him definitely as like a probably day 3 guy. You bring him in, for instance, I've been looking deep into the edges because I like to just base my scouting and stuff off of the Jags. So they have a depth issue at edge. So somebody like him, I could see, maybe the 3rd, 4th guy on a roster, start to develop him. He's a young player, I'm pretty sure, or I could be wrong about that. Oh yeah, he's actually 22. But just get him some more professional reps, and I feel like he's definitely an upside type of player in the league.
Jared, how about you?
I'm actually a little bit higher on Ryland than you guys. I think out of the group that we looked at, he's probably the most technically refined with his hands in his pass rush. He's got a lot of moves. He knows how to deploy them. I think his sawed-off frame, I love these kind of guys, like these Derek Hall, Nolan Smith kind of guys that are a little undersized, but they play more of an overhang role, so they basically control the flat and the edge. I think that's where Ryland fits best, like a 3-4 outside linebacker kind of deal. But he does need a lot more consistency tackling. I would agree with that. I do think he holds the edge pretty well, but anything going away from him or going inside, he does struggle with. So yeah, I actually had a late day 2 grade on him. I think late 3rd round, you could get a pretty solid outside linebacker if you're running something with like a jack roll or a heavy overhang kind of deal.
Yep. And Ryland was in Dane Brugler's top 50 that was released in November. So hearing the round 2 or round 3 buzz on Ryland should not be a surprise.
I think his testing. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I think his testing has a lot to do with his draft ceiling. Ryland's does.
Yep.
Yeah. So, Jared, you want to tell us about Gabe Jacas from Illinois?
Yeah, he's the only one. Did he declare for the draft? I saw that he was a true junior, and I didn't see anything saying that he had declared. So
I believe he just declared fairly recently, but we will double check and confirm that one.
Because my first thought watching him, I was like, he needs to go back to school, because if he can get a lot more consistency with his reps, he has a chance to be a very early draft pick. I think all of the tools are there with Jacas, because he's got power, he's got length, he's got athleticism. Illinois uses him perfectly. Have him do exactly what he's doing now in the league. I think more experience is the only thing he really needs. He rotates in between stepping outside of tight ends and inside head up on the tackles, and he absolutely whoops whoever's in front of him's ass. He was an all-state wrestler, and it was just an absolute blast. He is so good at stacking and shedding. I definitely need to see more from his pass rush, but he's got a couple of moves. I saw a cross chop. I've seen a really nasty hesitation with the swim over it. He has some really good stuff. I just want to see more of it, and I want to see more of it often.
Hey, Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm kind of actually on the same boat here with Jared. I didn't hear his name before you guys sent him to me, and I was actually a really big fan. And being 20, that upside, he's still a really young player. So definitely somebody, he's already apparently declared, but somebody that needs some time to develop. But I think he's got all the traits, like Jared was saying, the just speed off the edge. And one game specifically I watched was him versus Michigan that I thought there was one play. I'm not saying he's at that. I'm not getting in Bill's hot take level yet, but things like him just standing up over the center, like just seeing him be deployed all over the place, being effective against the run, having, a solid pass rush plan, still has room to grow. But yeah, just like a really versatile guy that I was definitely really a big fan of when I checked him out.
Cool. So, Bill, you got a big finish on Gabe Jacas?
Yeah, so the big thing with Gabe Jacas is he made Bruce Feldman's freak list in 2023. Bench presses 285 pounds at 22 reps. I take this quote from Johnny Newton, the Illinois defensive tackle who went in the NFL draft, and he said, and I quote, "He looks like he's been lifting since middle school. He's also a wrestler. I would not advise him wrestling." When you have a guy the size of Johnny Newton that says, hey, this is a guy that is not to be messed with, you're going to take that and run with it. Mm-hmm. He's got everything that we've talked about, and Mike and Jared have hit the nail on the head. This is a guy, a very athletic profile edge rusher, but he is as raw as gas station sushi. He's going to need a lot of development as he moves into the next level because he's a very young prospect. At the time of the NFL draft, he's going to be just under 21 years old. So this is a guy that you get in your team. I have a 4th, 5th round grade on Gabe Jacas because while he has some things that will get him on the NFL field early from a designated pass rusher standpoint, especially in like NASCAR packages where you just throw your best edge rushers at the offensive line and say, go, there's a lot that he still does have to work on. He's raw in his pass rush arsenal. His hand technique does need a little bit of cleaning up. But this is a guy, if I'm sitting there round 4, round 5, and he's on the board, a young prospect like this who's an athletic nightmare for teams, I'll turn the card in all day and I'll develop him in my strength and conditioning program with my defensive line coaches.
Cool. So, Mike, do you want to kick off Fadil Diggs from Syracuse, who literally declared, I think it was either yesterday or the day before.
Yeah, he was an interesting guy. Checking out another guy you guys sent me, I did not get to beforehand. Another, big frame player, but brings a lot of athleticism. One thing I thought was interesting, they actually have him sometimes at more of like a middle linebacker and like a 30-eye tech and have him rush the passer from there. I found that kind of interesting at his size. But, solid off the edge. I feel like he has a good step, but his reaction times could be a little off, so that hinders it a little bit, just getting quicker at, recognizing the snap and the play. Besides that, I saw some solid things against the run. He has that big frame, can anchor, shed tackles and stuff. And I feel like he's more of an upside. There's some things you're missing as just kind of like getting the complete package, but he's got that frame teams are going to like, and sort of like going back to Gabe and what Bill was saying about him. You see this, a guy like this, the 4th, 5th, 6th range, and it's like, we could take a flyer on this, get him in our building, develop him behind the guys we have. And I feel like he could be a solid rotational edge guy early.
Jared, what do you think?
I had a lot of trouble getting through Diggs's film. Like Mike was saying, they use him in a very different role. He stands up on the edge or he's off the ball. He doesn't have a whole lot of pass rush moves. And in the run game, he does hold the point, but it's only against tight ends. He really struggled. I watched the NC State game, was the big one where I was like, man, I don't know if he can play against NFL tackles yet, because he was just getting blown off the ball by NC State. I think right now he needs to play on the edge all the time. He just doesn't have any technical skills there. And for someone his frame, he has clear athleticism. He's got great size. His motor runs hot all the time. He just needs to play, a traditional edge role, I think, for a long time before he's ready to play in the NFL.
Okay. Bill, what do you have?
Yeah, no. So Mike and Jared hit the nail on the head here with Fadil. A lot of times we talk about positional flexibility, especially in edges. Can they play edge? Can they play outside linebacker? And so for some players, that's a plus. For Diggs, it's a minus, because now he's labeled as this tweener guy who's not really going to excel in either area. The big thing that I loved from him, though, is his football IQ and ability to find the ball. He seemed to be able to find it very consistently, didn't get fooled on a lot of plays. And the athletic profile's there, but he needs not only a pass rush tool bag, but the tools he does have when they're stonewalled initially, there's no sort of counter or anything to adjust from that. So he's kind of left in the water. But this is a guy in that same mold, round 5, day 3. You can take a flyer on his traits, get him into your building. Another thing that I really did like is even though he's not as long as some of the other edges we'll talk about today, he knows how to exploit the length that he does have. So while some folks may say that length is an issue, he can exploit it, get around it. From a Browns fan perspective and from a comp perspective, he's kind of like a lot like Agbo Arankwo in that edge rusher room. You know, not the longest guy, not the most athletic guy, but he's going to be the guy, a lunch pail type of guy who can make some plays for you. But I don't see any way he sees the field in the first year other than in situational and rotational basis.
So, Jared, you want to tell us about Kyle Kennard from South Carolina?
Yeah, Kennard has some really fun reps. My favorite game that I watched was at LSU. It was the best competition he played, and he just seemed like his motor was running extra hot that day. He was flying all over the field. All of his pass rusher moves were working. He was confident. He played the edge well. The problem is the other games I watched that didn't show up quite as much. I think, especially the Missouri game, the left tackle for Missouri really was able to hone in on his pass rush timing and really shut him down. And I think after I started watching that, I kind of noticed some tells to his pass rush. So he's definitely got to work on some counters. He's got to work on some new moves. But his juice, his length, he's got tremendous size. And I think a little bit more consistency in the run game. Very hot and cold when it comes to defending the run. In my opinion. But yeah, he's another one of these guys that I think the effort, the motor, the athleticism, and the floor he comes with the pass rush and run defending, like he's going to find a role in the NFL.
So, Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I think Jared really hit that on the nail, and it seems to be kind of a trend of a lot of guys in here, just bringing pure athleticism off the edge and stuff, and just not really that complete player, kind of going off of what Jared said, just like quick off the line, but doesn't really have too deep of a pass rush move, toolbox, they say. You can kind of figure him out after a few reps, he doesn't really have too much counters and stuff. So working on things like that, the size and length, of course, is there, but could have more impact versus the run. Older player too. I don't know. I tend to be kind of a little biased. Maybe it's because I'm a young guy watching. But 23, I think he might be 24 already entering the league. So just a thing, how much more are you really going to get out of him before he starts to plateau? So, it's an intriguing player, but there's definitely stuff to work on.
Bill, what do you think?
Yeah, so Jared and Mike hit the nail on the head. This is a guy, he's a pass rusher with juice to burn. The one thing I think is really underrated, his cross chop move is just a nightmare for SEC offensive tackles to deal with. He also is versatile. You could put him in an upright, you could put him in a 2-point stance, you could put him in a 3-point stance even, and watch him get after the quarterback. I'm a little higher on him than most. He is in my top 100 guys just because of the pass rush juice he currently has. Mike hit the nail on the head. Age is a bit of a concern because you don't really know where he's going to plateau at. My comp for him, it's Dante Fowler Jr. from the now Washington Commanders, but formerly of the Jaguars and the Cowboys. And I think he's going to have that same trajectory of a career. The Jaguars, when he came in, obviously he was a little bit raw, still had some things to work on, couldn't quite figure it out, and it took the right defensive coordinator to unlock it. And I think that's what we're going to see from Kyle Kennard is he's going to have his spot where he's drafted is going to be the ultimate tell of how his career goes, because he's going to need to find a defensive coordinator that says, hey, I've got a pass rusher here who's got some juice, he's got some athletic ability, but he struggles to anchor in the run game. He does have a limited pass rush on the inside. Most of his stuff is going outside moves, trying to blow by people and kind of build out that toolbox and say, okay, well, these are your strengths, but now we've got to build block the rest of your weaknesses.
I'd like to add, has the best snap timing and get off combination I think I saw. It was unreal. I mean, he got called off sides a couple of times, but he is going as soon as the center like twitches. Like that dude is full upfield at the snap of the ball.
Okay, so I think Jared kicked off the last guy. So okay, Mike, you want to kick off Mykel Williams from Georgia?
Yeah. So he's going into the season. Somebody I actually watched beforehand, reaching out with you guys, specifically because I was hearing, on Twitter and stuff, the Travon Walker comps. So I was like, okay, I got to check him out. Big frame player, offers a lot of versatility, stout against the run. Just, again, another guy, big frame, but does not moves like, somebody a lot smaller. Has that long arms, being able to create such separation and stuff. Again, same thing with Walker coming out, just somebody stout against the run that just needs to continue to grow as a pass rusher. So getting, more moves in this game, but that floor just off the bat, being a young player and being able to defend the run, I definitely see him. He's projected to go pretty early. I'm not sure. I've seen some top 10, top 15 range. I'm not too sure if I'm that too high on him because I don't think he's as much of a athlete and as explosive that kind of drove Walker up to that first selection, of course. But I feel like he's a mid to late first round projection guy that, you're hoping by year 2 or 3, he's a sure thing starter on your roster.
Yeah, and Jared, what do you have?
Nah, Mike hit it right on the head with that. He needs a lot more reps, a lot more consistency. Absolute freak. He's got you can just tell he's got all the measurables you want. And I mean, we've seen it with the league the past couple of years with Tyree Wilson and Travon Walker, and the league loves these kind of guys. Even if they're underdeveloped, they want to take them. They want to take them early. And I think Williams is right there. I think I'm also there with Mike. Like, I don't think the tape backs that up. I think he's a back end of the first round caliber player from his play. But we know guy 6'5", 270, probably running 4.40. Like he's gonna make the top 10.
So, Bill, what do you have?
Yeah, Mike and Jared hit the nail on the head here. This is a guy, he is an Avengers level threat. This is a player you build in the lab when you talk about his athletic profile, you talk about his length profile. Very high football IQ, consistently makes smart plays. And I reached out to a couple of sources that I have in SEC country kind of talking about some different prospects. And every single thing that I heard back about Mykel Williams is this is a high character kid, always in the community. This is a face of the franchise level type of player off the field. That being said, obviously there are still some concerns, and Mike and Jared kind of hit on him. I'd like to see his pad level be a little more consistent, play to play, down to down. He also tends to work too upright in certain plays. So I'd like to see him get a little bit lower in leverage. But this is a guy you could put as an edge rusher in a 4-3, an outside linebacker in a 3-4. I have him right around the early parts of the second round as my grade for him, but I could see him sneak up into the middle parts of the first round to a playoff squad looking to add some juice to their edge rusher room. My comp for him is Leonard Floyd. Same style of guy. This is a guy you could use as an edge or an outside linebacker. His pass rush and his athletic ability is going to get him on the field to begin with, but he's got to develop some things and work on a couple of things to stay there. A team, for example, that doesn't really have a need at edge, but could be interested, like a Baltimore level edge rusher. That's what I see from Mykel Williams. I've also seen him in Seattle as well, that same defensive scheme. So I could see those there. But I think this is a guy, he's going to go to the combine in February, and his testing numbers are going to shoot him up higher than what he truly is right now.
So do all three of you agree that the tape doesn't match the traits? Like, Mike, is that what I heard you say?
Yeah, because, again, like, kind of just in the Jaguars media and stuff, seeing the Trayvon Walker comps and then seeing, different mock drafts of him upwards towards 10, I'm like, oh, this is definitely somebody I need to check out. And then throwing on the tape, I'm like, not that I was disappointed, because I still think he's definitely a high upside player. Like we've talked about everything with his athleticism, size and stuff, but I would definitely say I was kind of the hype towards him didn't really match the tape. But I still think he definitely has his way to the league for sure.
And
I like Walker. I was going to say I liked Walker a lot more coming out when out of Georgia. He was a much better run defender and way more consistent. And I think he played a lot more than Williams did that final year. So I was a bigger fan of Walker, and I think Williams is the same caliber athlete. I just don't think he's the same caliber player.
Yeah.
Bill, is my take kind of accurate there?
It is, yeah. I think Jared hit the nail on the head there. Trayvon Walker was more of a complete player than Mykel Williams is. He has the pass rush and athletic ability that Trayvon had, but he doesn't have that run game ability. I, for one, was lower on Trayvon. Going back to it, I said Aiden Hutchinson should have went number 1 overall, but that was me back then. But I think if you want someone who has that same athletic pass rush profile as Trayvon as a number 1 overall pick, that's Mykel. But I don't think he's as complete a prospect. I think this is a guy, if you're going to take him in the first round, it's going to be in a class like this where there's not a lot of true blue chip first round prospects, especially in the edge rooms. This is a guy you can take a flyer on and say, hey, this is a guy that's going to run a 4.4, 4.5, 40-yard dash time at 6'5", 265 that has long arms that you can develop and know that at a minimum you're going to get pass rush production from him.
Okay. So second question. Okay, so last year there were 4 first-round edges: Jared Verse, Latu, Chop Robinson, Dallas Turner. Right? Where would you put Williams with that group of 4? Jared.
So my order went Verse, Robinson, Latu, Turner. And for me, Williams would probably go behind Turner, to be honest with you. I think Turner was a way better pass rusher when he was coming out last year.
Mike, how about you?
Yeah, so mine going into the draft actually was Turner, Latu, Chop, Verse. I would probably throw see, it's hard to look, based on how they've been doing now. I feel like he would fit somewhere. I would probably still have Dallas Turner first. I feel like he'd probably slot in between Latu and Chop for me in that 3 to 4 range out the 5 of them.
And Bill, what do you think?
So I'm going to be the outlier here. I actually had Latu, Verse, Robinson, Turner. And I think if all said and done, I think Mykel would actually slot in at number 5 behind all of those guys. I think the 4 ahead of him, Latu and Verse, were more complete, had a better set of pass rush tools. Turner, a bit of a better run defender. Robinson had significantly more athleticism than Mykel, which is pretty crazy to say considering how athletic Mykel is. But Chop Robinson was just a freak of nature. So I think if he goes in last year's edge class, I think he goes edge 5, which would still be a late first round selection, but I don't think there's any way. If he passed anyone, it would probably be Turner, and that would be like a 4A, 4B situation depending on who's on the clock.
Got it. Okay. So last player, Landon Jackson from Arkansas. So Jared, do you want to kick this one off?
Absolutely. I love Landon Jackson because he is a very unique player. He's got, you see it right there, 6'7", 280 pounds, and it looks like it on film. Like, he looks like a very large man. And with that, you think like big, strong, powerful. No, he is flexible. He is bendy. He uses all of those tools in his pass rush. He is extremely disciplined in the run game. High motor guy, high effort guy. I love a lot about Landon Jackson.
Cool. Mike, what do you think?
Here's one I might have a little bit of a different opinion on. So, yeah, I mean, one thing that's obvious is just a ginormous person on the field, ginormous player off the edge. I was kind of surprised of his impact in the run at his size. I know the height kind of is a little bit of a disadvantage with the pad length and stuff. But I mean, he is very physical. The size, I feel like, kind of hinders his speed a little bit. But overall, I mean, still a solid player, at least somebody you can build off of. Just being able to play the position at that ginormous size is definitely a good trait to have. But I feel like I may be a little lower than most on him.
Yeah, and you're going to be diametrically opposite Bill. So, Bill,
Yeah,
I know this is one of Bill's guys. So, Bill,
Right.
yes, this is so. Landon Jackson is my guy in this edge class, and Jared hit the nail on the head. You know, the size at 6'7", 280, but it's not a bad 280. He carries it very well for a guy of his size. First step off the snap is just amazing. Has hands that he uses effectively in pass rush moves. Very versatile. This is a guy you could put on the edge. You could put him inside. If you needed to, you could even put him in a 2-point stance and stand him up. The big thing, and we don't talk about it enough, is the way his ankles can actually bend as he's going around the edge is pretty neat to see. I mean, this is a guy that can get around the edge pretty well. He does play with a higher pad level than you'd like, giving up unnecessary leverage, which kind of negates some of that 280-pound. Sometimes his reaction times are a little bit inconsistent as you move through snaps. Sometimes he's right there, and then sometimes it's about a half a second later. But there are some injury questions and conversations with him, ankle injuries, ACL injuries. From the folks that I've spoken with, there are no red flags on any of their tape. There's no red flags on any of mine. Everyone's had some form of an injury, especially if you're 6'7", 280 pounds. It'd be pretty hard to stay healthy at that point. But I don't see any injury concerns for Landon Jackson.
He's been healthy the past 2 years. He's put on good tape the past 2 years.
Exactly. He's been healthy the past 2 years. This is a guy right now is edge number 3 on my big board, and I have him as a bona fide first-round lock in this draft. My comp for him, it's a little bit lofty because he went number 2 overall, and I say should have went number 1 overall, but Aiden Hutchinson. Same things that you saw from Aiden Hutchinson in Michigan, the large size, the length profile, the bend, things like that you see in Landon Jackson. I think this is a guy, his ceiling is probably starting around the playoff range, right around that 16, 17 spot. And I think his absolute floor would be 30, 31. I don't see any way he falls out of the first round unless there's a medical concern.
Yeah. So I've seen varying grades on Jackson. I have heard people as high as Bill. Bill is not the only one that I have seen have Jackson that high. But at the same time, like Mike, I think it sounds like out of the 3, you're maybe lower. And I've seen other people that say Jackson is mid-second, maybe he falls to early third.
Yeah, I would say because, there's still, of course, things you like. I mean, he's a big guy flying off the edge. I'm not sure if I really have, of course, like we've talked, not necessarily full of like those blue chip guys in this draft at the edge position. Besides, you can have, I feel, Abdul Carter, in my opinion, in that conversation. But I feel like that maybe could have him slip. I feel like he's more of one of those, we're going to be talking on draft day, like, oh, how did Landon Jackson make it out? Who's going to trade up at the top of the second to go get him? I feel like he's more in that range, top of the second, mid of the second might slip a little bit. The injury things, I kind of agree with you guys in that sense. It was more of early in his career, and he's been able to still stay on the field and be productive. So I don't think that'll necessarily be an issue. It's just, some of the things, again, the pad level not being as impactful, I guess, on a power stance at that size is a little bit, I guess, maybe that drags him down for me. But still, overall, I mean, he is a good player. I don't know if I have him in the Aiden Hutchinson comp category yet. But.
Yeah, I don't.
and that's fine. I'm higher on him than most. Like I said, he's edge 3 for me, and the only 2 that are ahead of him are Abdul Carter and Nick Scourton. who I talked with Newt on a previous episode, but he's right there at edge 3. You know, you look at it, the size he carries with that athletic profile and the fact that he can bend. This is a guy that NFL teams are looking for, especially if you're running a 4-3 package and you want an edge rusher on that left side. You could use him in a 3-4 as a big body edge, but I don't think that's going to maximize his potential. So, but this is a guy that even the playoff teams are going to be all over as we want another pass rusher in our room. The Buffaloes, the Detroits, the Minnesotas of the world that are picking in that back half of the first round, I think would be his absolute floor. And in the middle parts, the Atlantas, the Miamis, the Houstons would be kind of, I think, where teams would start to say, okay, this is a guy I now feel comfortable taking in this range. I don't see any way currently with just the players ahead of him that he gets up into that top 10 range, unless he just completely blows it out of the water testing at the combine, which is possible. Some of the folks I've spoken to have said some of the numbers that they've been hearing could be near that Abdul Carter level of testing and that he could shock some folks. But yeah, this is a guy, he's been my guy since I watched him over the summer. And I think that a lot of folks, there's a high variance on him because a lot of folks will see that athletic profile and see this is a guy that's a star and a stud. But then there's also the folks that see the kind of negative side of it too. And I get those, but I think this is a guy, when all is said and done, Mike, you hit the nail on the head. This is a guy, if he's still on the board come the start of round 2, the very first thing we're going to hear the folks at ESPN and CBS Sports say is, how did he end up here and who's coming up to get him?
Yep. Okay, so a couple other questions on Landon Jackson. My understanding was 2023 was inconsistent, may not be the right adjective, but he had a couple of standout games, I think, in 2022 or 2023, and he chose to come back to school. And now we're talking about him coming out of 2024 as he's a top 45 player, top 50 player. Do you agree that it was good for him to go back to school? And like, what's the difference between last season and this season? So Jared?
He must have made some good NIL money, because I think his stock didn't really change this year for me. He had a really, I think what you're referencing is his Alabama game last year, where he absolutely whooped up on Alabama for like 4 sacks or something crazy like that. Yeah, and I don't think his stock has changed much since then.
So Mike, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm kind of on the same boat as that. Just relatively not had the same exact season as 2023, but relatively kind of, you saw the same stuff. I feel like we'd have the same conversation if he entered last year in the same range. In my opinion, the bottom of the first slip maybe into the top of the second, but I feel relatively he's kind of in the same boat. Maybe, yeah, like Jared said, got hit with a few NIL bucks. Mistake.
So Bill, how about you?
Yeah, so the Alabama game is probably the one that really put him on the map nationally. I mean, 3.5 sacks and 11 tackles versus Alabama it's not like against Arkansas Pine Bluff, but and that probably put him on the map. But in addition, as the season went on, you saw things that Landon Jackson did that don't necessarily pop up in a stat sheet, pushing the pocket, getting around folks, making quarterbacks uncomfortable, that don't necessarily pop up in a stat sheet. So last season I had him right around top 40, so right around the end of the first round. But as the season's gone on and into summer scouting, he started to slowly creep up boards, and then you start to see, okay, that Alabama game is not a fluke from the production you can have from him and the skill set you have. Statistically, it might have been an outlier, but when you talk about things that are outside the stat sheet, this is a guy game in, game out. He's like your neighbor's Lamborghini. He's that really nice motor that can go and go and go, and you don't necessarily have to worry about it. Is it always going to turn into production? Not necessarily, which is a concern. But I think this is a guy that has slowly started to creep up draft boards. And like I said, he's firmly locked into edge 3 for me. The folks behind him, like the Mykel Williams of the world, have some question marks. The Mykel Williams, the Princely Umami Ellens have some question marks that they need to focus on. Landon Jackson's a more well-rounded prospect than some of those guys.
Yeah. So, Jared, where would you compare Landon Jackson and Mykel Williams? Who would be higher for you?
Jackson.
And it's not close with the way.
Yeah, no. As from a film perspective, it's not close. I think Jackson is a much more polished, much more well-rounded, and I think a little bit more useful than Williams is right now.
Mike, what do you think between Landon Jackson and Mykel Williams?
I agree. I would have Landon Jackson. I just think Mykel will go earlier because I feel like he has a higher ceiling, with that size and speed and being able to kind of build him, like we were talking earlier, as like your individual player. You kind of create it almost like you're playing Madden, like with all the attributes. He's just kind of learn to continue to play the position. But I'd say overall, you're getting more kind of concrete with Landon Jackson.
So Mike and Jared, I see you like nodding your heads yes when Mike said something to the effect of Jackson is higher on the board, but you expect Williams to be drafted first based upon traits.
Correct.
And Mike, did I paraphrase what you said effectively?
Yeah, you pretty much hit it on the nail.
Yeah. So, Bill, do you see it? Obviously, I know how high you are in Jackson, but could you see the draft kind of playing out where there's a world where Mykel Williams goes higher than Landon Jackson?
Yeah, so I actually have them rated pretty close. Landon Jackson is my edge 3 and Mykel Williams is my edge 5. But I could see a scenario where someone takes Mykel Williams because it's the ceiling versus the floor conversation, where Mykel Williams probably has a higher ceiling than Landon Jackson. I feel like Williams's floor is lower than Landon Jackson. So it's a matter of if you're a team that's picking, and Jim, you and I have talked about this, if you're a team that's a new GM that's picking for the first time in the draft, are you going to want to go for a boom or bust prospect on your first swing through? Or are you going to take a safer guy in Landon Jackson? Whereas if you're a Brandon Bean who's been around the block several times, you could take a swing on a Mykel Williams because you have job security. So I think that plays a factor into it as well.
Well, fantastic. Does anybody have any other questions or comments about any of the edges that we've talked about?
No, I'm just wondering why Bill's a James Pierce Jr. hater.
They didn't
even mention his name once.
Well, so he's edge 4. He's the lunch meat in between the Jackson and Williams sandwich.
Gotcha.
So he's right there.
He's my favorite edge. That's the only reason I was asking.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, so I appreciate Mike and Jared joining us for the first time. And Bill, as usual, like I said, sometimes I think I see you more than my kids and my girlfriend.
Right.
So it's always a pleasure to see you guys. So before we get going, Bill, do you want to tell everybody kind of who you are and how they can find your content?
Absolutely. So you can find my content on X at Spark Scouting. You can also find it at The Draft Detectives as well. I'm also a writer and analyst for CadesDraftRoom.com as well, so you'll see a lot of my takes there. But feel free to give me a follow on X there at Spark Scouting. In addition to that, make sure that you like and share this video, subscribe to the Draft Professor YouTube channel, and turn on that notification bell. We've got all sorts of content like this, scouting reports. By the time this episode airs, we'll be gearing up for Quarterbacks Week, which is our version of Discovery's Shark Week, where we talk all things signal callers, 5 days of just straight quarterback content. Make sure that you also follow our lovely host here in Jim on NFL Draft Fanatic, no I in Fanatic on X as well. But Jim, I'll turn the keys back over to you, sir.
So Mike, do you want to tell everybody where they can find your content?
Yeah, so you can find me also on X at Path to the Jags. I talk, of course, a lot of Jags and getting into these guys now entering the draft. Been working the past 2 years in college football, so a deep passion for the game, and just trying to spread my opinion. So, hopping on shows like this is a great opportunity, and I appreciate it.
Fantastic. Jared, you want to tell everybody kind of who you are and how they can find you?
Yeah, I'm just a draft guy. You can follow me at Draft Guy Jared on Twitter. I post a lot of threads and stuff evaluating offensive and defensive linemen, and then I put it all into a Google sheet at the end of the year called the Big Boy Board. So I'll post that. Actually, by the time this comes out, my first round of positional rankings will be pinned to my profile. So you guys can go and check that out.
Fantastic. So if you haven't already, as Bill said, subscribe to the Draft Professor on YouTube. Like the video on YouTube. Throw some comments in on YouTube too. We like engaging with our followers. And this channel has daily draft content. So this episode will be airing on Thursday, January 2nd, early in the morning. Later tonight, we're going to be doing a team building conversation with Newt, Owen, and a guest, and it's what positions would you build a franchise around? And I know there's going to be some hot takes there because I'm in the minority that says you build a team around linebackers. So I know there's going to be some interesting dialogue on that one. Friday, you'll be able to catch Bill doing a Senior Bowl preview, 7 p.m. Eastern, with a couple of people. And then Friday at 9 p.m., we are doing our first draft roundtable. And that's just a bunch of draft professors sitting in a room talking about stuff. So the conversations before the podcast and the conversations after the podcast are always really good. So we're turning those conversations into a podcast, and we're calling it the Draft Roundtable. And then as Bill said, next week is everything quarterbacks. On Monday, we're defining what a scouting report is and what a grading scale is without mentioning any quarterback names. Tuesday, we're going to be comparing some scouting reports of existing NFL quarterbacks, guys like Drew Lock, Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith, and I know I've already forgotten one of them.
Jalen Hurts.
There we go, Jalen Hurts. Thanks, Bill. So that's what Tuesday is. Wednesday, we're going to cover the 2026 quarterbacks, and then Thursday, we dive into the 2025 quarterback class. We're going to give you a top 5, and then Friday, we're going to cover the rest of the quarterbacks. So that's what's coming at you for like the next 7 days. To everybody watching, thank you. Please like, please subscribe. On behalf of Mike, Jared, Bill, myself, thank you for watching this episode of Mrs. R Relevant, and we will see you tomorrow. Thank you for watching this episode of the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast, brought to you by the Draft Professor. Please follow the Draft Professor on YouTube, X, and Twitter at NFL Draft Fanatic. No, I am Fanatic. If you have a moment, try using some of the Draft Professor mock draft functionality, including a first-round challenge, a second-round challenge, rank players, and draft a team. Thank you very much for watching, and we look forward to seeing you on our daily draft podcast tomorrow.